So this big idea of Jubilee, for some of you, it's probably familiar. For some of you, it's not familiar. But I'll try to break down the story. This concept of Jubilee was built or was based on Leviticus 25. So when you take time, I want to encourage you to read the book of Leviticus. I know it's complicated, but it's one of the most beautiful orders of God and how he governed his people. The year of Jubilee was meant to be a year of freedom. But in the year of Jubilee, God placed this amazing economic and social structure for his people. So just keep in mind, the people of Israel were under the slavery of Pharaoh. They are the generation of Abraham, and Pharaoh put them under this unbearable slavery. And they were there for 400 plus years. And God, by his mighty hand, delivered them from Pharaoh, right? And on that delivery, he brought them through the desert and gave them a land so they can be a nation of their own. It's not really simple to build a nation out of a thin air, right? You don't only need a people to build a nation. You need other things like economical structure, like social structure, legal structure. And right, to do all that, they cannot just do it out of nowhere. So God has imposed this incredibly powerful, something that reflects God's wisdom in a way that we cannot comprehend. And this system, we're not under it today, and no Christian is under that system. But I do believe it teaches us a very valuable lesson and insight that continues to inform our decision in our conduct today, and how we build relationship with one another, and how we build a home for each other. And that comes from this particular system. First of all, we need to understand that the term sabbatical year or Sabbath and this Jubilee refer to two different things. So I'm just going to give you a quick breakdown. So God commanded the people of Israel to celebrate the seventh day, Sabbath day. On this Sabbath day, God really gave them an example. I am all-knowing, all-powerful, omnipotent. I do not get tired or weary, but I myself worked for 7 days to build the whole entire universe, and I rested on the seventh day. So he says, I need you as my people to rest on the seventh day, and then you need to take time to meditate on the words on the words that I verbalized to you, on the promises that I have given to you. Let that day be a day of rest, and let that day be a day of worship for you to say, I am not defined, and I am not my identity is not my work or my job or my labor. My identity and meaning is my God, and in him I'm resting. I'm doing that with my family. I'm doing that with my church, my community. So God commanded his people this incredible level of order for them to rest on the seventh day. He actually was not only caring for their spiritual need, but also for their mental need, that they can experience a mental breakdown from all their labor, to sit down and process that, right? So this seventh day was given. But also as an economic order for the whole nation, they were told on the seventh year, they should not work the land. They should not plant anything. They should just stay back from the land, and they should experience a year break, and they should give the land a break. They should give their family a break, their ox a break. They were meant to give a 1 year break on the seventh year. The obvious question is, what the heck? How are we supposed to provide for our family? But here's the promise of God was, if you are committed to celebrate the seventh year, God was going to provide on the sixth year a crops that would worth for 3 years. So he just technically says, I'll give you a 3-year salary on your sixth year, just rest the next year on that fourth year. So, and other people give so many scientific reasons into why we should not farm a land on the seventh year, but God's order was even greater than scientific reasoning. It was the way for people of God to learn to trust God, not only in their own ability, but in his mighty work to provide for them. But that's not only that. On the 50th year, after 49 years of labor, the people of Israel were meant to celebrate a year called a Year of Jubilee. In Tigrinya, we call it Amet Alilta, which is a year that was meant to be celebrated very, very, very well in a way that would bring healing to the land, to the people, to the system, that can put an order in the land that will provide an incredible economical blessing, social blessing, and also psychological blessing for the people of God. So what was this year of Jubilee? In this 50th year, the command came, and it says, you know what? In this year, if you have a slave, free them. If you have owned a land that never belonged to you, but you bought it, return it back to its original owner. On this year, you must also extend God's mercy and his forgiveness throughout. In this year, do not be greedy and do not continue to just build an empire. Be a person of God. And this year was meant to balance the economical order, the social order, and then a way for people to extend God's mercy to each other. So let's give an example, and then we'll break down these three key critical points. One was on this year of Jubilee, the property that was sold before was meant to be reverted back to the original owner and families, as it was designed by God at the time when God divided the land among the tribes and the families. The deal was, if you sold a piece of land or rented out a piece of land during this time of the year of Jubilee, that land would revert back to its original owner. All slaves, for example, were to be freed or to be purchased back on the year of Jubilee. All debts were forgiven and considered paid in full. A year of Jubilee, once again, the land would rest and there would be no planting or harvesting. They had to live off the previous year's crops, and it would be a time of feasting and celebration. So the system of Sabbath in Jubilee imposed this incredible economic system in the whole entire kingdom. However, it did provide a lot of benefits as well. For example, one of the things it provided was it prevented greed and empire building, and there was a definite limit to what you could own and how long you could own that. Right? It really curtailed wealth and power, so the rich don't become exceptionally rich and the poor goes way underground. But it gives time limit in how much one can own this incredible wealth, and eventually you have to give it back. Right? You have to give it back. You have to extend mercy. You have to let your slaves go. By the way, to just give a quick idea, slaves at the time were not the way we understand slavery, right? Slaves were when a man is not able to provide for his family or he's under incredible debt, the man would take his family and willingly submit under a particular family, and they would submit themselves under that family, right? And sometimes if they're not able to pay off their debt, they will be slaves forever. But on that 50th year, they would automatically be freed from all their debt, so they could be freed from being slaved under that family. This prevented generational slavery, right? If somebody submitted himself under rich men, and then they have to work for 30 years, their children are also going to be slaves. But that year, the mistake of their father or the lack of their father's inability to provide will not be their future. So the children would be free and the mother would be free, so they can start a new life. And then whatever land their dad lost, they can return it back. They will find it back. So this really helped and curtailed generational slavery. And then there was a limit to such kind of service. If you submit yourself under an authority, under a leadership, to be a slave, you know that even though you are incapable of providing something for your family, you know that by God's mercy on the year of Jubilee, God will free your family. It also provided economical guidelines and stability. To the people who owned the land, the value of slaves, the value of the land was always fixed according how long the year of Jubilee will be, right? So think of it this way. Right now, the real estate market in America is so complex. Like we don't know when it's going to be really high or low, whatever. But at the time, if the year of Jubilee is about to come in 30 years, your land is going to be very expensive, because once you sell it, the person who's buying it has 30 years to live off it and to do whatever they need to do in that land. But if the year of Jubilee is only 2 years away, then the land is cheap, and one can buy a land and be able to work that land and make profit out of it, and be able to return it back. Because on the year of Jubilee, Every land goes back to its original owner, the way God has designed it when all the people came. So it really provided stability. Like, real estate market cannot just always be expensive. Only the rich can afford it. It would always have some kind of stability. Before you have to give it back on the year of Jubilee, you have to really know how to use it well, and then be able to get your family out of debt or any struggles that you have. Um, so isn't it like fascinating, yo? Um, but on the year of Jubilee, there was another thing too. God's mercy. God's mercy was not only meant to be received from Him, but it was meant to be extended by one another as well. For God's mercy to be extended, people would automatically say, "Hey, your debt is paid in full." They will just forgive them. And then to those who've done you wrong, you just forgive them. If there was a death in the family that was caused by another person, you let it go. This was the year for people to taste and see how good God is and how fair our King is. God shows in a very concrete way that He truly loved and cared the earthly welfare of humankind. God owns, and then also it teaches them that God owns everything, and He's not worried about anything but human beings. On the other hand, we do worry about stuff. We worry about the fact that we all have, whether we have enough food or we have a well-done system. But God doesn't, and if it's up to Him, our welfare will always be good because He's a fair King. God was saying to those not only physical but very real emotional needs that people had for stability of life, stability of mercy, for people to experience freedom. God understood that, and He provided that through the year of Jubilee. The people of Israel, like, they would come back to this great understanding that God owned everything by virtue of His creation. Every woman and men are made by Him, and everything that they own comes from Him. And then they were told and they were instructed to be good stewards and good managers of what God has given to them. Especially the system of Jubilee really brought home this idea that you only own something just for a certain period of time. It reminded them, even if they get so wealthy, they remember that I don't own this forever. So I can't be prideful. I can't keep going, thinking that I own everything. This principle is really, really powerful. So this principle, though, was also given with a preview. Right? In the Old Testament, there's always a preview. The preview, for example, in Noah's Ark, right? We also know the story of Noah. In Noah's Ark, the preview was that God will protect His church here on earth in the midst of all the evil and then the unfairness of this world. God will protect His church, and He will rescue His church one day and will raise His church from the dead. That was the preview of Noah's Ark. When Moses was walking through the Red Sea, you know how the Red Sea split it and they crossed it. And that was a preview of our baptism, that in the waters of baptism, that God will meet us and rescue us from this identity that we have since the day of our birth, this identity that only takes us to death. God gives us a new identity in baptism, and that's life. So what's the preview of Jubilee? The preview of Jubilee was not an event. The preview of Jubilee is a person. And that person is Jesus Christ, the Son of God. You see, in Jesus Christ, when we find those critical things, there's no generational slavery, right? The mistakes of your father, the mistakes of your mother, the mistakes of the generation before you, it does not mean it also implies to you. The divorce that was experienced in your family, or the pain that you've seen around your family, the abuse that you've experienced around you, it does not mean also it's yours. Because of Jesus, you find freedom. Because by His power of His virtue, now the year of Jubilee has come for you today. You do not have to wait for 50 years for you to experience the year of Jubilee. The year of Jubilee has arrived. The year of Jubilee has come. And the year of Jubilee was a preview of the Son of God. This man, His name is Jesus Christ. In Him, you have been freed from any slavery, a slavery that Satan imposed on you, a slavery that sin, the world, imposed on you, a slavery that is psychological, a slavery that has been inherited from a culture or family. Jesus Christ has freed you. The year of Jubilee has come for you. Also, the year of Jubilee is a reminder that anything you have, anything you own, whether you're successful or you've been building your incredible empire, there's a limit to it. Whatever relationships you have, whether it's romantic or platonic or family relationships that you have, remember, don't be too prideful and don't look down on people. Whatever you have is God's, and there's a limit to it, right? One day it will return back. And you cannot take it with you to the presence of God one day. So whatever you have, be a good steward, a good manager, but not stubborn to a point where you're worshiping it. And a lot of marriages fall because people don't want to share their resources, or they're stingy with what they have, or they have pride in what they have accomplished, and they look down on their spouses and the relationships that they have, or they demand success or power in order for a relationship to work. The year of Jubilee, through Jesus Christ, it teaches us He is our King. But also a year of Jubilee brings mercy. Any relationship has to be built in mercy. It has to begin in forgiveness, in mercy that is extended from God and given to each other constantly, right? We go to relationship and we seek relationships that are centered in God because they're centered in mercy and forgiveness. It doesn't mean the other person in the relationship should continue to sin, but it always stands with this gracious approach to things, that we know our sinful nature and we understand it. We extend mercy to each other. In Jesus Christ, we submit ourselves to Him and to one another. And in that, we are driven to seek righteousness in goodness, because apart from it, we cannot seek righteousness apart from God's grace, because one day we will fail or we will be hypocrites. Remember, I don't know what kind of relationships you are seeking today, what kind of relationships you are trying to repair today. It could be with your family, with your friends, or maybe you're about to start a new relationship, or maybe you are in your dating season. I don't know where you are today, but whatever you may be, remember, there's a year of Jubilee, and that year of Jubilee is now Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and you belong to Him. You've been baptized into His name. You've been called by Him, and you've been rescued by Him. He is yours and you are His. So you have this freedom. You're not a slave to whatever happened to your family in the past. You're not a slave to the brokenness of this world. You're not a slave to the thinking of this world. You've been freed by Jesus, the Son of God. And because of that freedom, you are called to be a faithful husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, brother, sister, and also servant of God. I want to finish with this. The reason the year of Jubilee is so crucial, but also our Lord and our Savior Jesus is so crucial to our relationship, is this: Jesus Christ is a king men did not crown and they cannot overthrow. And we are citizens of a city men did not build and they cannot destroy. So I'll repeat it again. It was said by one of the greatest British converts, who was a historian. He says, Jesus Christ is a king men did not crown and they cannot overthrow. Jesus Christ gave us a city men did not build and they cannot destroy. Because of that, you have the freedom to pursue healthy relationships, because your king will always reign and nobody will overthrow him. And you are pursued to live life according to God's will, because you are part of a city that men did not build and they cannot destroy. Because of that, you have a guaranteed king and a guaranteed city. And that gives you freedom to give it all to those who are around you, knowing that your king cannot be taken away from you, and the city that you're waiting cannot be destroyed by mankind. May the mercy of God strengthen and equip you, empower you to be a faithful brother, sister in all your endeavors, knowing that you have received freedom by the work of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Hey, love you guys. Thank you so much for this honor.